Hey everyone, and welcome to Wildlife Inspired. I'm your host, Scott Keys. Remember, you can find me on my social media accounts at skeysimages and my website, skeysimages.com. And today we're doing another live show. This is going to be one of those 10 images segments that I've been doing. And today I've got a really talented young photographer named Tobias Yoder. And I've known Tobias for a couple years now and watched him grow. And I think you're going to find this episode pretty eye-opening and pretty incredible. I think one of the most talented, young, and creative photographers that I follow on social media. So without any further ado, let's jump in. And when I took this, I just wanted the head, the eye, the bill to be all sharp, and then the rest just to like melt away.
The thing I have to say with ducks is it's hard to get creative with ducks or waterfowl in general.
All right, Tobias Yoder, how are you, man?
Doing well. How are you, Scott? Thanks for having me on.
All right. So now I've been following Tobias for a couple years on social media. And, it's funny, and I'll tell this to you. I probably never told you this before. I'm kind of finicky with people like when they start photography. It's like, I follow a lot of people on Instagram, and I don't want to follow like 8,000 people on Instagram. So I'm kind of selective. So, I noticed you would comment on pictures and stuff, and I'd look at your stuff and I'd be like, hey, he's pretty good. I'll make him work for it. I'm not going to follow this kid right away, right? So then I forget which image you posted, but it was something of like maybe a year ago or year and a half ago. And I was like, wow, he's really good. I got to follow him now. So yeah, I thought that was kind of funny. And you've done a couple, you did a podcast before. You've done a couple of these little interview things, right?
Yeah, I've done a few over with Ray.
Okay.
But yeah, but not too much, but a little bit. So people might know me from a few places.
And if you're not following Tobias, particularly on Instagram, that's like kind of your main outlet for photography.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where would they find you?
Yeah. So if you just go to Instagram at Tobias Yoder, that's my account. I don't post on there terribly frequently, but that's where I put out my pictures. So yeah, if you want to see some of my work, then head over there.
Yeah, and I'm gonna have Tobias. I'll pull up I'll just go ahead and pull up your Instagram, and I wanted to find out a little bit from you. Just your background. How long you been doing this? What's your status? People are probably looking at you like, oh, this kid's kind of young. So yeah, kind of tell us where you're at in life and where photography fits into that.
Yeah, for sure. So bird photography. I started getting into birds and photography at the same time. In spring 2015. So at that point, it was not really targeted photography. It was pretty much chasing birds with the camera, just trying to find cool things. And yeah, and so from there, it's really developed a lot more. And all through high school, I was really into it. And now I'm in my third year of college. So that's yeah, obviously I'm still as into it as ever, and I get out whenever I can. But yeah, that's my situation.
And where do you live?
Yeah, I live in Austin, Texas. So
Okay.
yep.
So pretty interesting area, right? Because from Austin, you can get to a lot of different. I mean, you're not close to any one thing. By the way, if you ever, I did a birding thing in Texas one time, and I'm kind of looking at the map and like, oh, I'll just go from here to here, and it'll take a couple hours, right? I'll get from like Galveston over to the mountains over on the western side of the state. It's like a 12-hour drive.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah,
for sure.
But
Yeah,
Austin is pretty central, right?
Yeah. So Austin, yeah, it's central Texas. So in of itself, it's not the biggest birding hotspot in Texas, but like you said, it's kind of within striking distance of a lot of good places, and it's right at a junction of kind of western birds and eastern birds. So it's yeah, so it's a pretty, overall, all things considered, I'd say it's a pretty good spot to be.
Yeah, is that one of those areas where you can get like a meadowlark and you don't really know what it is, like
Yep.
eastern or western? Is that like one of those species that? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I never know. Yeah, I never know.
I'm scrolling through your Instagram feed. You had mentioned that you don't post a lot, and one of the things that I'm kind of curious about with people, and so I post an image every day on social media. It is not necessarily a fine art gallery, right? I mean, you can't have 1,600 pictures that are all wall hangers.
Right.
You have a different strategy here, and I think you really do kind of look for your best work to post. Have you culled this before? Have you kind of gone through and said, yeah, this stuff is crap, it doesn't represent me anymore?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. I don't remember when it was, but there was some point where I felt like I'd improved, and I looked back at my old posts, and I thought like I've done this a couple times where I reach a point where I just decide, yeah, a lot of this has got to go. Probably some of the stuff near the beginning now probably could go at this point. But yeah, I think that like I know that you have your second Instagram account, the S Keys Avian Art, and I feel
Oh
like
yeah,
this is kind of
go ahead and plug that for me, man. S Keys
yeah,
Avian Art. I don't have
yeah,
any
for sure.
followers on that one.
Yeah, but yeah, so I think it's kind of a similar thing where you don't post on it as much, but it's kind of more of a little more of a curated um,
Gotcha.
gallery. But
Yeah. And Instagram's real finicky. It definitely rewards and pushes your content out the more active you are on it. So the more you're posting, the more active you are, the
yeah,
more stories you put out, your content gets fed to, their explore kind of algorithms. But yeah, I'm really impressed with your overall gallery. What do you shoot? Are you a Canon or Nikon shooter?
Nikon currently. I started with Canon, but now I'm Nikon.
Okay. Okay. And let me pull something up real quick because I forgot to ask. God, I don't think I even asked you this question before, but do you know what the question's going to be? I bet you somebody in the chat will chime. What is the next question Scott's going to ask Tobias Yoder? Do you know what it is?
I actually don't.
Let's see if somebody will chime in
Uh,
here. I'm going to take a quick sip. What is the next question that Scott's going to ask Tobias Yoder? There's like a 12-second delay, so I have to wait for the chime to
yeah,
catch for
right.
the chat to catch up with me. I got my thing pulled up though, so I'm ready for it. All right. I don't know if the delay is too long, but all right. There it is. There it is. Christopher Smith got it. Back button focus or not? I forgot to
Oh,
ask you this. I asked
okay.
every
Yeah,
guest this before the
yeah.
show, and I
All
forgot
right.
to ask you.
I have some thoughts on this. So
Uh,
I focus with yeah, I use back button focus. I also use the front button. So I have my back button that my thumb is hitting is group AF, and then the button on, I don't even know what it's called, FN or whatever, that my middle finger hits.
Function, yep.
That I have as single point. Um, yeah, so I understand that your your reasoning as far as like if it's shutter button, then yeah, it can be quick, but it just yeah,
You,
not for me, not for me.
okay, here's where we're at. Back button focus has now take a pretty commanding lead. I've got 9 yes to 5 no's, and that includes me. So, God, if I had known you used back button focus, I probably would have found somebody else. But that's okay. I mean, you made it onto the show, so that's good. All right. Without any further ado, let me pull up the next part, which is just going to be your actual images. So I think you can see them here. I don't know if we coordinated the I would say the timing the right way. So just kind of follow along with me. I'm going to try to pull up one other thing down here. See if I can get this thing to work. This thing works sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't. Oh, there it is. Okay, so I just have a chat window that opened up. So now people can actually see the live chat that'll coincide with us at the same time. All right. Let's start. So I have 10 images of Tobias's. I will tell you, yeah, like really, really good stuff. If there's anything in here that's unusual, I think especially because I think one of the things that I recognize you for is creativity. You really do have that kind of in your arsenal. What do you attribute that to? Is that an intentional um, focus of yours? Like, are you always trying to be different?
Yes, yeah, very definitely very intentional. I I think there's certain times where I feel like I'm out shooting and I feel kind of like I'm on autopilot, where I'm just like just going through the motions, with all the kind of your standard photography principles, and then I'll come back later and just be kind of like, well, what was I doing out there? Why did I even take these pictures?
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, that definitely is a big focus for me, and I feel like I spend a lot of time trying to come up with ideas and things outside of shooting. So I appreciate you calling that out, because that's definitely one of my main goals.
Yeah, when you look through, for example, if anybody's on, Tobias's Instagram account later, scroll through there. I will tell you there are very few standard bird portraits in here. Like very few front lit, kind of average composition, meaning it's not really small, not really tight. It's just kind of the average composition. You got a bad cardinal in here. You got to get rid of. But let me. Yeah, I don't know
Was
what the
it
hell you were. Yeah, you got like 99 amazing images, and then I look at this cardinal, and I'm like, yeah, I don't get this one. But I told Tobias I was going to bust his chops a little bit. He has a good sense of humor.
Yeah, that's probably one of the ones that could go.
But what's interesting is like when you look through this, I mean, there's like very, very few like standard. Sometimes people say like bird on a stick, but there's very few standard compositions or very few standard lighting. Like everything is either high contrast, backlit, silhouette, movement, color. There's always something that's a little bit different in here, and that's really why I have been drawn to your work. It's actually why I put you on the show. I just thought, with what you're doing creatively, I think it's very inspirational to people who are looking to get outside of the box. Like if you're trapped in now, listen, I'll be honest, I love birds, so I'll take bird portraits all day. I just love them. I have a goal to make them as beautiful as I can. And when I can be creative, I enjoy being creative also. But
Yeah, for sure.
I don't mind that. Like to me,
Yeah.
it's not to me, it's not a challenge to be different. Sometimes it's a challenge to be better. Like how can I make this shot?
Right.
And then
Sure.
sometimes I'll also get in these modes where I want to have like a theme to what I'm doing. So I may, shoot a lot of low light. I shot a lot of blue hour recently just because I wanted
Nice.
to play around in blue hour. So I was shooting these blue hour scenes. So yeah. All right. Can
Yeah,
you
for
see
sure.
the image that's
Mhm.
go ahead.
Oh, yep, yep. Yeah, I was just gonna say that. Yeah, I think totally. Like when I was saying that, like, yeah, so my goal is to try to like do kind of interesting or unique things. It's not that I think that's that there's any right or wrong way to do photography. And when I look at your work, I think when I think of really pleasing bird portraits, yours is some of the best out there. And so there's definitely just a difference of styles more than like a conflict, I guess, of
Yep.
styles there.
Yep.
But yeah,
There's 100. One of the things is we're in a pretty like niche thing. Like we shoot pictures of birds. It's
yeah,
it's pretty neat. But inside of that, there's a whole spectrum of photographers that I think are terrific. Some of them do like birds in flight, which I think is really, really difficult to do, and they do it really, really well. And then there's some that do these really like bright portraits, kind of real super clean, like nothing in
yep,
the background, just everything is technically perfect,
yeah,
and they're good. And then there's people that do like the super kind of creative, maybe small in frame, or maybe a lot of silhouettes, or maybe a lot of dramatic lighting. And then there's people who do kind of these more standard like bird portraits who are also very good. And the thing that I always try to tell people is I have a style that I like, but it's not better. There's no judgments.
yeah,
It's just a little different. So
for sure.
what I can appreciate and respect doesn't mean that I would do it. It just means it's different. And in this genre, there's a lot of different avenues to take.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said.
Well, you should. It was pretty wise. All right, let's jump into this first one. This I honestly, I love to be able to identify species by silhouette. So let me take a guess. I am gonna
Can you guess
go.
by behavior?
Um, I I want to say reddish egret. So I'm
Yep,
gonna go reddish egret.
yep, that's it. Reddish egret. Yeah, they're
And for the record, that is not listed here under the description of the file you sent me. So I didn't
oh,
cheat. I
you're
actually
getting
I was kind of thinking it doesn't look right for a tricolored, so I figured Texas reddish egret's a good chance.
yeah. So you got to guess the fish species now, or
No, no chance.
but yeah, okay. All
So
right, yeah,
tell us
sure.
about this one. Tell us about kind of the
Yeah,
backdrop and where you're positioned and how you get this shot.
yeah. So this is probably one of the oldest photos that I have on here, um, and so this was at the beach at so when I went here, like photographing reddish egrets hunting, the way that their behavior is they run around a lot more than most egrets and will occasionally flush up a fish. So when I had arrived at this at this spot on the beach, really early morning, the reddish egrets, there was a few of them, but they hadn't began to move at all. So I kind of was a bit stubborn, and I was like, well, I could go photograph the birds that are being active right now, some of the plovers and sandpipers, but I figured like, I'm just gonna lay down, kind of crawl up and just wait for them to wake up. And I'm not going to say that there was a high chance that was going to happen, and I basically ended up getting really lucky. But yeah, I had 3 or 4 shots where it worked out really well with the fish popping out of the water, and that was kind of felt like one of those breaking point moments where I was like, wow, I feel like I just kind of got something that's a little bit next level for what I had been doing at the time.
Yeah.
So
It's interesting because it's a nice photo without the fish. It's a very postable kind of like, but you add that little fish, which is maybe a 1% of the frame, and it changes it. Like it takes it from like a 6 or 7 to like a 9 or a 10. Like those little details sometimes could just make photos complete.
yeah, it really gives it a story that it wouldn't have without it.
Did you change now? You'll see this very warm image. Is this
Hmm.
is this a change in hue? So in other words, did you pull down or pull up the temperature, I guess? Do
Yeah,
you
yeah, it
remember
would have.
like warm the image?
Yeah, yeah, it would definitely would have been warmed up. Probably I'm I'm not sure what white balance I would have been using,
Right.
but yeah, definitely, warm it up, kind of make a more of a golden color. Uh, Probably the original would have been kind of just a little bit more of a neutral color, not quite as
Yeah.
as warm, but
Yeah.
I
And
thought
when
that
you
this
warm,
nice.
yeah, when you warm silhouettes, it kind of works. A lot of times you'll see people, I
Yeah,
say like cheating golden hour, and the bird is illuminated a little bit, and then the whole scene gets warm, and it doesn't feel right. It just kind of feels like they just took the slider and
yeah,
cranked it
yeah,
over. I'm
yeah.
doing a video in the future. It's called, oh God, something like, I have all these list of videos that I'm making. One of them's called like 5 beginner mistakes for bird photographers or wildlife photographers, something like that. And that's one of them, where sometimes you can cheat a little bit and make a image warm or cool, but often when you go too far with it, it just doesn't feel right anymore. It doesn't feel natural.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
Especially like if there's the wrong shadows, that can totally
Yeah.
make it look really off if you do that.
Yeah.
I went through
Uh,
that phase for sure.
all right, let's pull up this next one's going to be tough. Now I have these layers, so I've got a bunch of images turned on behind this one. If you're watching this on a phone, it's going to be really, really tough. So I'm hoping people have larger monitors that can increase the size. Because this is a portrait orientation, it is very difficult for me to scale this up any bigger than it is scaled up now. But when I first saw this, I was not particularly impressed. So in other words, I didn't go like, oh my gosh, that's like one of the best photos I've ever seen. And then I kind of looked at it, I was like, wait a second. Like, did he actually just film a comet with the silhouette of a bird underneath it? So that's what this is, right?
Yep, for sure.
Single
Yeah,
single frame or
yeah,
multiple
single frame.
exposures.
Yeah.
So
So yeah, this is
are any of your images blended in any way? So composited or
okay. Yeah. So not composites per se, but I will focus stack and I'll do panoramas.
okay.
Um, so that and those things, focus stacking or also bracketing
Yep.
exposures I'll do also.
Okay.
But all those things are, to increase depth of field, to increase focal length, to increase dynamic range, but none of that is things that are altering the scene. So I would never drop a bird into a scene that wasn't there.
Okay. So what Tobias is saying is everything that he's mentioned. Now we had an episode on photo contest, by the way. You got to read those rules. Some of them actually allow things like stacking or compositing bracketed exposures. Mostly landscape photographers do that. Occasionally bird photographers do it. I do it sometimes when there's a real contrast between the sky and the subject, and you just can't get it all. Like your camera can't capture the dynamic range of that scene. You can use bracketing, and then what I think Tobias is saying is sometimes you may take like a pan up or down and then kind of stitch them together so that it's all captured at the same moment in time, but it's not. But you're creating a bigger. You're basically getting more pixels than you can with your camera.
Right.
Yeah. So what you don't do though is take some hokey background off the internet and download it and then stick it on a silhouette, right?
Yeah. Right.
Okay. All right. Just to be clear, because I don't want people looking
Yeah,
at this
for sure.
thinking like, That's impossible. Nobody photographs a bird with a comet in the background. This is a
Yeah.
single frame, one image.
Yeah, so yeah, this is one that I definitely wanted to talk about because I have had a number of people, either ask if it's composites or assume that it was fake or something. So yeah, so this image, so it's all one exposure. There was a significant amount of noise reduction and like sharpening that went on to get it to a useful state. But I would not consider that to be, altering the scene or misrepresenting what was there. It's just things to enhance image quality. So yeah, so this was an image when I had heard about the comet. I immediately thought, okay, how can I get a bird with the comet? And so first thought was an owl, which seemed impractical. And so then I quickly arrived at that okay, a roosting vulture would be the best option. And from that point onward, there was a lot of planning involved of trying to find where a vulture was that would be in a site that was low enough light pollution to get the comet to be bright, and at an angle where I can line it up with the comet. And even once after probably day 4 or 5, once I did arrive, find a scene in which that was possible, just technically it's really hard, especially considering the gear I'm using is a D500 with a 500 5.6 200 to 500.
Oof.
And that is not good in low light.
That's not your low light setup.
No. So yeah, and so then I forget what the shutter speed was, probably 8 seconds or so. And so at that point my ISO is somewhere like 8,000, so we're really high. But for me, I always try to get the best image quality that I can. But if I can't get a really high quality image for a picture I want to take, I don't really care. I'll still follow through with it. So yeah, so this was definitely a really fun shot to capture, and yeah, and I think it's kind of one of those things where just kind of the nature of it makes it cool of what it is. The pose of the vulture isn't the best pose ever, but it's for what it is. I'm definitely glad that I was able to capture it because it is a rare event.
Yeah, I don't think anybody. I've never seen I'm maybe somebody else has done it. I've never seen a bird photograph with a comet in the background. So I think you win. Now, a couple things I was kind of curious about, and I just noticed like the amount of planning that goes on in this kid's head. So you have to know where that comet's going to be. So what, like, are you using one of those apps that tracks like the stars and all that kind of stuff? And what is the window of time that comet is in the sky? Is it seconds, minutes, or hours?
It is days.
Okay.
So yeah, it was so there's kind of like it comes in over the course of, I'm not sure how long, but there's like probably a 2-week window or so when it is reasonably bright. So this is not something that is like zipping by. It's really big and it's really far away, so it behaves just like a star in the short term. But then after a few weeks will fade by. So yeah, so that's.
And is this? Would it have mattered where you were in the country? Like, was this visible everywhere in the country, or did you have to kind of be in the right place, or did you happen to just be lucky with where you were at? Fascinated by the comet.
Yeah, it would have been visible anywhere in the northern hemisphere, and I think the southern hemisphere later on. But sorry, my cat is trying to come up here. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yes. So, but the arc it makes in the sky will be a little different depending on where you're at. So yeah, kind of depending on where you are, it'll kind of rise and set at different times. But there was probably a 2-hour window or so where it'd be possible for me to line it up.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Pretty creative, pretty unbelievable. Like really, really impressive. Let's go to this next one. And one of the things I also like about you is you really like to create these almost like landscapes sometimes, where you're just popping birds into the landscape. So this image is pretty without the birds. Throw the birds in there, and it's really, really stunning. You've been able to you've had some recognition on some contests. Like you've gotten some accolades, top 100 on Audubon contests, stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
Was it more typical? I'm sorry. Was it more typical to be on this type of stuff, or was it more typical on more the standard portrait stuff?
Um, at this point, I think probably this for like the Audubon contest specifically. I don't think that they probably wouldn't have gone for much of a like a really landscape image, but I think there are other contests where they do look
Hmm.
for that kind of things more and they'll appreciate it
Yep.
more. So it depends on who's who's judging
Yep.
it.
We had a whole episode. If I remember, I'll put a link in here to the last episode we did with Gail Bisson, and she did a whole thing on contest photography. It was a really great episode. I loved her perspective on it. But one of the themes was every contest is actually different. Like what will do amazing in one contest won't even get a consideration in another contest. So tell me a little bit about this. Now, I would imagine this is a different focal length.
Yeah, so this was with my 18 to 35 1.8. So this was probably taken at around 24 millimeters. Uh, so shall I give a little bit of a story behind the shot
Yeah,
here?
absolutely.
Yeah, so this is the most recent image that that is in this list. So this was back in January, this January, and I had taken a trip up to Wyoming, just sleeping out of my car. So which was very cold. So anyway, at this point, the Grand Teton National Park, where this was taken, there's a lot of things that are kind of a lot of roads that you cannot access during the winter time.
Mhm.
So so this is kind of a famous spot for people who know the park, where you can get these reflections of the mountains. So this morning I had seen that there had been cloud, it had been covering the entire mountain range for most of the morning, but I knew that it was going to recede. So I had the idea of, okay, I want to try to get down to the river before this fog clears and get kind of the mountains poking up. And at this point, I didn't really have any idea of getting a bird. I mean, I knew it'd be nice, but it's always in the back of my mind, but no clear plan. So it was a bit of a hike through the snow. Without snowshoes, it can be pretty rough.
Mhm.
But get down there and I see this goldeneye kind of off to the side, and so I know that, all right, if I really want to capture this, I need to be including the whole wide angle scene. And it just didn't seem like there was any way I was going to work with these by trying to approach these goldeneye. I mean, that's just not going to work. These are wild birds. And so I was kind of taking some landscape images, and then I hear the sound of ducks flushing, and I quickly look and I assume that they're flying away from me, like I had just flushed them. But it turns out they were flying right at me, and so luckily I was able to think quickly enough to frame it up, get down low to get the reflection, and increase my shutter speed enough. And I feel like this just added that sense of moment and kind of life to this scene that really brought it all together. And I just think it really conveys kind of the how pristine the scene was well, and it's one of my favorite images from that trip for sure.
Yeah. But there's a lot of people that hate you right now. I'm just gonna put that out there. Like there's sometimes I look at your stuff and I just get angry. Like you're like 20 years old, and your thought process is that of somebody who's been doing this for like a decade. When was the first time you took a wildlife picture? How old were you when you
Uh,
consciously said, I want to photograph a bird or whatever?
15.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
5 years you've been playing around. How many years have you been serious? Like, I'm gonna get up early in the morning and I'm gonna create an image.
Um, well, getting images was that was always the goal from the get-go, but the first year I didn't have any understanding of light or just I just didn't really understand anything other than bird picture.
Right.
So definitely been a development. I would say I would consider myself as being serious for uh, maybe 3 years or so. Uh, but it's definitely it wasn't like a very clear, like, okay, here's 4 years of just messing around and then 1 year of being serious. It was somewhat of a smooth
Like a
transition.
progression. Gotcha. All
Yeah.
right. Let me pull up this next one. Is this I never really asked you about this. Is this a burrowing owl?
Yeah, it's burrowing owl. Yep.
Okay, based off behavior, I kind of thought. Wide angle lens?
Yep. 18 millimeter,
Okay,
or
Florida?
maybe a little more. Sorry. No, this is
Florida.
Texas.
Okay, so you get those burrowing owls. Are they close
I,
to you in Austin, or do you have to travel a little bit?
yeah, they're pretty close.
Okay.
About 45, 50 minutes or so. So
Okay.
not super close, but close for bird standards.
Have you worked with them often? They seem to be. I've worked with them a couple times. A lot of times they're pretty tolerant, especially if they're in. I mean, in Florida, they're in neighborhoods, so they're just
Yeah, right.
baseball fields, libraries. They're like just hanging out everywhere, so they're not. They're not real skittish for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So the ones here, it's a little bit of a different setup. You're not going to find them in neighborhood parks anywhere. Where they are is, at least near me, is these cornfields that are out of season in the wintertime. So they're only here in the winter when there's not corn there. And it's out in kind of just this really vast open area. And it's a very, I have been to Florida, and it's a completely different experience than the ones there. There are definitely a good number of individuals here that are also really tolerant. Not quite as much as the ones in Florida, but still pretty tolerant. And then there's some handful that are really skittish, just like it's really hard to photograph them because they fly away so much. But that's not, I'd say, probably 50-50. So you
Okay.
do got to find one that is tolerant.
Okay. And then, do you remember like the focal length on this? I'm guessing like
Yeah,
35-ish millimeters.
yeah, something like that. Somewhere between probably like 25, something like that.
Okay.
So this image, this was so this owl in particular, I had really wanted to get a wide angle image of the burrowing owl, and so there weren't many good natural perches other than just posts around. So this perch is one that I stuck in there. I'm not sure if it was the best option, but I think it's a perch with a lot of character to it. So I had set this up near this owl, and the owls here, they don't become active until pretty well after sunset. So I had tried for quite a few times to get it to land on my perch when I had my wide angle lens set up with a remote. And so this was the first bird, or like the first time I tried using a remote for wildlife photography.
Hmm.
I bought a remote specifically to try to photograph this bird. So it kind of, I think, marked marked another kind of landmark point of me trying a new technique, and something that I've tried to do a lot with since then.
Was that a wireless remote?
Yep, yeah, wireless. Yeah, it's an
Yeah,
infrared.
I did a quick video on this. God, I did like a bunch of videos lately. This one was on like cable releases and wireless. The wireless releases generally do not focus, so you had to pre-focus this lens and just leave it, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
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 pre-focus it and set, have mostly static settings. You can do a little bit of auto stuff, but yeah, that was definitely something that made it hard. Is
yep,
I don't know when this owl is
yep,
going to land,
yep.
so I don't know how greedy should I be with getting a
Yeah.
fast shutter speed or whatever.
I think you can bracket with a wireless shutter. You should be able to still use a bracketed setting, and that way it gives you like some chance. You're like, oh, I wish I would
Yeah,
have thought of that. I think you can. I don't do a lot of wireless.
yeah.
One
No, there's
advantage.
no
Go ahead.
yeah, there's no reason why you couldn't do that.
Yeah. One of the advantages of a cable release is that they will give you a half press option. So you can actually focus with a cable release, but the cable release does not allow you to sit, 20 or 30 feet away. You got to be like 3 feet away. So it is kind of a neat process. I've used some wireless triggers. I haven't had a whole lot of luck or time to set them up, because it really takes a lot of planning. Like, you really have to know this bird is going to land right here.
Yeah.
Your, I guess your opportunity and your focusing, you really have to stage it. It's just basically like, it's got to land here, and I'll wait until it does, and the light has to be right. And I've tried to, I have one setup I've been working on. I'm telling you, Tobias, if I ever get this to work, it's going to be good. Like, it's going to be real
Okay.
good. But I
I hope it
can't, like,
works.
it's just almost impossible. Like, it's so
Yeah.
frustrating. I tried it a few times, and I'm just like, screw this. I can't just keep wasting my time setting up this stupid remote and not getting the image that I want. But yeah, I've had this
Mhm.
vision shot for 2 years, and I've set it up a few times and just haven't been able to get it. Now here's a non-bird image for us. This is attractive.
Yeah, so yeah, this was I don't have that many images that are not birds, but typically if something else catches my eye, it's usually a pretty good opportunity. So in this case, the first I found this by hearing the frog squeal, which was kind of sad to hear, and it was just like, what is that bird? It just was so strange sounding, and kind of look around, and then eventually see, oh, it's actually this frog that's trying to escape this snake. and it was pretty. I mean, they're small, but it was a pretty intense thing to stumble upon. So as they was kind of slithering, the frog trying to go away and the snake slithering after it, and when it kind of reached this junction point of all these palm fronds, all kind of making these interesting lines, it just kind of really came together as making somewhat of a powerful image. So yeah, definitely not. I mean, maybe you might think it's beautiful, but I was gonna say not particularly beautiful, just because it's quite gruesome.
Yeah.
But it's I still think it's an interesting image, and it's one that I quite like.
Yeah, you need to watch this show. I have two guys coming up, not next week, the week after that, for a show about snakes. It's actually a snake showdown.
Ooh.
I would love to show them this. I hope they're watching it. It's Matt Sullivan and Daniel Wakefield. I don't know if they tune in because
Yep.
they're not super bird guys, but they're really really good or reptile photographers. They're kind of herpers.
Hmm.
But yeah, they would. I think they would love this. And you're right about the composition. The way those leaves like really lead everything in. It's a special image. Like it's not the. I don't know that I would hang it on my wall,
Hmm.
but I don't want to keep plugging. I got all these like concepts I'm coming up with. We have a show about wall art coming up too. I feel like I'm plugging stuff, and I'm really not trying to. It's just all these things are in my head.
Yeah, it just comes
But
up.
we were talking. I was talking to this person who's going to be the kind of leading this conversation about wall art, about what makes an incredible magazine photo and documentation and story, and maybe a calendar photo versus what goes well over a couch in your living room. I would say in a magazine, this is one that you're flipping through and you're like, oh my gosh, like look at this. This is incredible. And even artistically, the composition, like you mentioned, is really, really strong. Um, but I don't know that a lot of people are going to hang a dead frog over their couch. So it really is interesting how images work in their environment where they're supposed to be. But yeah, this is really, really well done. Nice job. All right, let me get to this next one. This is similar, another smaller in frame. You've got, I think, about three or four that, to me, kind of had this very similar theme where remove the bird, it's still a pretty image. Stick two
Hmm.
birds in there, it's even better. So, where was this
Yeah.
one taken?
Yeah, so this was in Florida as well as this last one. Um, yeah, this was quite a this was quite a scene. I had look at the forecast for this day. It was supposed to be rainy all day, and it just conditions. You can obviously do interesting things in rain, but it's not the conditions that you hope for. Um, though being on a photography trip, it's like, okay, I'm going to shoot anyway.
Hmm.
So going to the beach. At first, there actually wasn't that much rain during the day, and it was cloudy and overcast, and um, which actually did provide for some nice hikey things. And so as it was approaching near sunset, you can see this storm that's kind of coming over, and as it got closer and closer to sunset and the storm came closer and closer, it just started getting more and more dramatic. And so at first I had my 200 to 500 on, and I was trying to I was all the way out at 200 trying to get as much of the sky as I could because it was so interesting. And once as it kept getting better, eventually I realized, okay, no, this uh, 200 is not cutting it. I need to capture this whole scene. And being at the beach, I don't really want to be carrying around another lens with me. I probably should have brought my camera bag with me, but I just had my lens. So I make a decision. Okay, I'm going to sprint all the way back to my car and switch lenses, and then just find anything I can find. If I was thinking probably a goal would be my best shot. If I can't even get a goal, heck, I'll just take photos of just the storm itself.
Hmm.
And so the birds in Florida they're really really at least at this location are really tolerant. So as I was trying things out, trying to get some shots with some gulls, nothing was quite working, and I see these skimmers kind of far away just working down this coastline.
Hmm.
And in Texas this would never work because the skimmers would be too skittish, but here I thought, okay, I might have a chance. So I kind of run up to a position where I think I have like a good composition with this curve lying in the storm, and I just kind of crouch down and just hope that these skimmers are gonna not turn away. And and sure enough, they did fly kind of right at the perfect spot, and provide that sense of moment, sense of scale, and really complete the scene and make it a pretty cool image, I think.
How would you describe your proficiency in Photoshop?
Um, Definitely. I So yeah, I started using Photoshop probably 6 months ago or so. For a long time, I was just doing stuff in Lightroom.
Hmm.
But since then, I've really have learned a lot, and I'm not gonna say I'm great, but I think I'm pretty proficient. I can do most things that I want to do.
What did this look? So I guess what I'm getting at is this concept of how important is editing to a photographer. So,
Yeah. Hmm.
what does it look like out of camera? And I've heard, I guess there's two schools of thought. One is if you're a great photographer, it should look good in camera. It should, you should just be able to tweak it a little bit and send it out, and that means you're a great photographer. And the other
Hmm.
side is, well, a great photographer believes in the whole process, meaning you capture an image, and then the other side of it is the processing. So that's the other part of this talent that there is. So, and the reason
Yeah.
I asked that with this didn't probably look like this out of camera.
Yeah. So yeah, I can tell you kind of exactly what I've done to this image.
Yep, walk me
Um,
through.
yeah. So starting out, the that bright part in the sky was really really bright, and it was very kind of overpowering. So if you imagine this image, there's kind of like in the top left, there's a really bright section of sky, and then very very dark kind of on the right side there. So the big thing here was kind of taming those highlights and balancing out the image, and kind of you can see the clouds in the top there, darkening those down, cooling them off, increasing the contrast there, and then um, also kind of the kind of having that highlight, instead of being a really bright spot, kind of taper down into the whole scene,
Hmm.
to kind of make it more balanced. So it wasn't actually a bracketed shot, but it kind of has that HDR
Hmm.
type feel to it, just because of how much I've tried to even out the exposure of the different parts of the image.
Yeah, and the reason I ask that is because often when you see these like storm clouds, mountains, the scene you had before, it does take a little bit of work to bring out some of those contrasts. Like the storm clouds feel much more dramatic when they have a little bit of highlights and a little bit of shadows, and you feel that texture or that mood that storm is erupting. When it's a flat image, sometimes like that raw file looks like, you don't always feel that drama. You don't feel like
Yeah.
that sense. And it's mountains, sometimes it's lakes, storm clouds, whatever it is. Sometimes it's even things like tree bark. Sometimes when you've got a dominant tree with great textures and mosses and all that stuff, it doesn't always look good when you look at the raw file, but then you start to play around in there and you bring out some of those contrasts and you
Yeah.
manipulate it a little bit. I don't think it's anything that is incredibly difficult to do, but I think when you figure out how to extract some of that, the key elements, it can make a
Yeah.
huge
Yep.
difference. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing that you can do to really help your images, especially things that are where there's a lot of detail and a lot of image, is just knowing what to dodge and what to burn, because that can really just bring your eye to the important parts of the image and kind of darken down uh, the areas that aren't as important. And
Yeah.
so yeah, dodging and burning, and messing with white balance and those kinds of things. That's something that I do on every image, and
Yeah.
I don't feel like it's you know
It's not cheating.
I yeah
Yeah.
yeah, right. I don't
It's
consider
not.
that cheating or whatever.
I had this conversation with a few people who are like, they'll say something like, "Well, whatever comes out of the back of the camera is what it is," and my argument is that it's absolutely not what it is, because I will take a picture of a scene sometimes, and I've shown this to people, and I said, "Look at this with your eye."
Yep.
Now I take a picture of it and look at it, and they're like, "Oh, that doesn't look the same." I'm like, "Yeah, because your eye has way more dynamic range than this camera
Yes.
in 2021 can capture. Now, maybe in 2050, we'll develop a camera that can capture the full
Hmm.
dynamic range of our eyes, but our eyes can even see colors that aren't even possible to reproduce in camera. So a lot of that is just about, I think, editing. And anybody that thinks that film photographers didn't dodge and burn their images should read about Ansel Adams, because
Yep.
one of the things he really believed in was dodging and burning. And I'm really going to resist the opportunity to plug my Patreon page right here. So I'm going to skip it, but I will tell you that is a big part of, I think, what people. It's a very simple process, and a little bit of tweaking with light and a little bit of tweaking with color can often make an average image look unbelievable.
Yeah, and it's very important to um, capturing the scene as you perceived it as well. So even if you're not trying to say like saying, okay, I'm just going to completely, yeah, it's just a problem of thinking that, okay, doing anything in post is changing the scene, because how you perceive it is not the way that the camera captures it, as you said.
Yep, and even two people will see the same scene differently. Like our eyes are different. Like the range of colors that we perceive are different. I have a son with color blindness. He he's not going to see
Hmm.
the scene the same way I saw it. So everything I guess is subjective. At the end of the day, what we perceive isn't even often reality. So when we go to edit that image, we're going to recreate sometimes a scene that may have felt much more vibrant than it really was. But that's the way we felt about it. And I think as a photographer, you have every right to try to replicate the emotion that you want in a scene. So let's get to this next one. Now, you've got this labeled. It says cave swallow. I can't tell what this is. So
Yep.
I'm gonna trust you on it. Now I will tell you, knowing that it's a cave swallow makes it a little more interesting, because if this was a barn swallow image, I don't think it feels the same with these rocks in the background. So walk me through this one again. Another probably a shorter focal length here.
Yeah. Again, yeah. This is another one. I know it doesn't look like I was that close to the bird, but another one with a remote. So this was. So this was this cave swallow that was in a cave. So this was I think a kind of a good segue into what we were just talking about before about capturing the way that you perceive a scene and the way it feels. So in this case, what that meant was I'm in this cave, and it's really dark in there, and it has this really kind of dark feel to it. And the original image, it was much warmer, or maybe not much warmer, but it was definitely warmer. And I was just feeling like this just does not convey the dark feel that I felt like that it had. And I tried just darkening the whole image, which I have done that as well here. But that just it I didn't want to completely just darken everything so it felt just completely black. And I realized that making it cooler kind of makes the image feel colder. And so yeah, I think that the fact that it is a cave swallow, I think, does add to the image, and that this is a cave swallow in a cave, which is kind of their natural habitat. Because most of the time you see them on bridges and overpasses and all
Yeah.
kinds of places.
Yep. Yeah. This is a species that's kind of like peregrine falcon, right? These peregrine falcons, they nest
Hmm.
in buildings now. A lot of them have adapted skyscrapers as their homes. And then you see one in a natural cliff setting, and it's like, oh my gosh, that's perfect. This is a really great example of a species that has adapted to these natural structure or these man-made structures, and has chosen to nest in a lot of man-made structures. But yeah, really well done. And again, I think when you can get that species and then you tie it into habitat, it kind of brings a little bit of that birder back. It's like, okay, this is what a
Hmm.
cave swallow is. This is what it should be. This is what it should feel like. And then you put it into the environment. I think it's really, really well done. Now this next one here is pretty interesting. You entered this into the Common Bird Challenge. You got your
I
ass
did.
kicked. Yeah, you got your ass
I
kicked.
did. I did.
Yeah,
I sure did.
yeah. It's not an Instagram friendly image. This is
Hmm.
again, when we go back to what works well on social media, what works well in a magazine and calendar, and what works well on a wall. This is clearly one of those images that I could see printed hanging in somebody's house. By the way, so do you
Yep.
sell prints? Like if you're selling
Um,
prints, let's get your name out there.
so I'm at the moment I'm not selling prints. It definitely would be something I'm interested in. I just need to get around to actually making that available. Because I have had some people ask me for prints, but I don't think it really is ever going to go anywhere if you don't have an easy way for people to do it. But Yeah, so not at the moment, I'll say.
Okay. I mean, if somebody messaged you and said, "Hey, I want to buy this for my living room," would you figure it out?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, listen. First of all, if you're not following this kid, if you're watching this on replay, I don't care. Like he's a mandatory follow on social media. So it like seriously, it's a mandatory follow on social media. I think there's a couple hundred bird photographers that I follow that I think are mandatory bird photographers that everybody should follow, whether you like their style or not. You should follow them, and I think you're one of those mandatory followers. But yeah, again, it's a beautiful scene. Anything particularly different? Now this is converted to black and white, I assume.
It's actually isn't converted to black and white. There's just no color in that scene.
Okay. Yeah, every now and
Um,
then you get one on the back of the camera that just has no color in it.
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, this one it was. Again, I think that there's kind of a trend, and a lot of my favorite shots are times when I felt like I just got really lucky. But there's kind of, even if you do get lucky, you need to be able to like see how to capitalize on that. And and regardless of what your thoughts were, it doesn't really change the final image particularly. So in this case, the real lucky aspect is just that those Canada geese are, perfectly mirrored
Yep.
and kind of almost in identical positions. That was just, it almost just, it just, has this kind of almost, I'm not gonna say the image is perfect, but it has this really pristine kind of, perfect look to it. And then that tree kind of offset
Yep.
on, more or less a third kind of
Yep.
gives it an additional focal point. And without that tree, I think the tree is more important than the geese actually. Probably,
Yeah.
if I imagine like removing one or the other, it's probably most people would say this is a picture of a tree rather than a picture of geese.
Yeah.
But I don't
Yeah.
really think it matters too much how you look, what you think of it as.
Yeah. It's interesting. I actually was going to tell you, if the tree wasn't in there, would you have posted this image?
Definitely not.
Yeah. It's amazing, and that's again, it goes back to your first image, which that little teeny fish that occupied 1% of the frame. This tree is probably occupying 3% of the total frame. Without this tree, it's okay. But and even with the wrong tree there, the fact that you could see the shape and the pattern of the tree, I think is really interesting as well. So yeah, I love this one. Really, really nice job on that one, Twice. All right, then we got two more. Yeah, we're getting toward the end here. We got two more. I saved my favorite to last. All right, so I'm gonna give you this barred owl, which is really
Hmm.
pretty. I am a little curious. I focal length on this one. Do you remember? This doesn't look like a wide angle shot, so I would imagine you were a little further away with 400 to 500 millimeters.
Actually, it is wide angle.
Is
Yeah,
it?
this is with the 18 to 35. I'm not sure what the exact focal length was,
Okay.
but in that range.
So it looks like the background is too close to the bird. So maybe it's just the way the back is it a pretty dense habitat then, or am I just reading this wrong?
It's pretty dense, pretty dense.
Okay. Yeah, you can
Um,
get these tricky images with shorter focal lengths when you don't have when the background is really close to the subject. It will fool you into thinking it's a. I did this recently. I photographed something at 30 millimeters, and I asked people to guess the focal length, and most people guessed between 200 and 400 millimeters. But it really was only because the background was that close to where the bird was. It was only like 6 or 7 inches away from the bird, so it felt much much tighter. Whereas your wide angle stuff, when you're shooting
yeah,
a sky, it feels like it's a much different image. Yeah, I would have guessed
right.
this was probably 200 to 300, 400 millimeters.
Yeah. So yeah, I think definitely what you're saying is true. That if you have something where things are kind of more or less on a similar plane of focus, then the wide angle perspective doesn't read as much as when there's a lot of depth to the scene. Yeah. So in this case, um, so this barred owl, I photographed it a lot with a wide angle lens, trying to because it's a very very tolerant bird that that is just completely not bothered by my presence. And so of kind of the series of wide angle images that I've taken of this one is kind of my favorite. And like when you first look at this image, I feel like it doesn't have like an immediate impact to it. The bird does not immediately stand out, like crazy. It's not like there's a bright spot with a bird
Hmm.
silhouetted in it, and everything else is dark. It's kind of there's nothing that like makes your eye shoot to the bird. And so for me, this kind of makes it more of feeling, more like a landscape image. And I think that uh, I kind of like that. I feel like it almost has a bit of a more subtle look to it.
Hmm.
It's not super dramatic, um, and and I like that. Feel like it works here to have the entire scene in focus. Um, so that is one thing I do want to talk about how I process this image.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so this was one where it was I'd say a focus stack. And the reason why I don't just say immediately a focus stack is that the stacked image I took after, like the image that I took stopped down and focused on the background, I took that after the owl had left. So
Hmm.
so my first image was of the owl at something like f4 f5.6, and that was just like, okay, I need to get a sharp image, with this scene with the owl, and I'm not going to set up my tripod and stop down to f16 right now. And then once the owl had then taken off, then I was like, okay, now I'm going to get my full depth of field. So again, this isn't what I would. It's not misrepresenting the scene because those images were taken from the same spot, uh, you know, a minute apart, say. Um, but it is kind of a technique to overcome the depth of field that it would normally capture. And I guess if I had taken the risk to set up a tripod and get it, get it stopped down, I could have gotten it more depth of field in camera. But really, you probably wouldn't even notice that much of a difference unless the image you were looking at large anyway. But yeah, and so this was another one where there was kind of some careful processing involved as far as making the background lower contrast and making
Hmm.
those details back there not super contrasty, because
Yeah.
so that it doesn't steal attention from the bird. But yeah, overall, I think this just captures the habitat really well and captures the location in the scene for me.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'm looking at these images and I have these thoughts, right? Now they're questions I want to ask you, and then you answer them before I can ask you them. So I wanted to talk to you about the intentional processing of this. This is not a high contrast image. It almost looks like you reduce the contrast in
Yeah.
post. Am I wrong on that? Okay. So when
Yep,
you
you're
do
correct.
that, as a general rule, it will tend to I'll use the term soften in image, but it gives it a softer. Sometimes it can even give it like an ethereal like feel where it kind of feels light and airy. There's a
Mhm.
couple things about this composition. I can't show you with my mouse cursor, but if you can just visualize this with me for the people that are listening, follow the branch from the left, the lower left up. So that's like a nice leading line. And then inside that leading line, you've got this triangle where he's framed really, really nicely in that little triangle. If that stick was like running through his head. So it's just really well composed and it's balanced because the subject is on the left side and then it's kind of balanced with this kind of cluster of trees on the right, but they're not dominant. They don't like pull your attention. And then and again, I'm guessing at this, but notice the subtle change in luminance. So if you look at the top left, you're going to see it's a little bit brighter than the lower right. So it kind
Mhm.
of keeps your eye on the bird rather than get pulled over to the right. Am I getting this right?
Yeah, you are getting it right. Yeah, you'll
Okay.
notice there's kind of a bit of a spotty, vignette of sorts that
Yeah.
kind of,
Yep.
uh, darkens the edges there.
Yep. And but
And
it
yeah,
doesn't feel vignette. It's real subtle. It's real smooth, but it keeps your eye over on the left side of the frame rather than get distracted on the right side.
for sure. Yeah, the first time I processed this, I went too heavy with the vignette, making the center real bright, and then um, I realized that no, this is killing the subtlety to the scene,
Hmm.
and it's just making it gross. So then
Yeah.
I kind of backed off, and I think yeah, those lines are really what this image is all about, because that's what occupies most of the space here.
Yeah. Yeah. Really, really great. I mean, this is fantastic. All right. Now, before I get this next one, I will tell you, Tobias, this I think I don't like
Oh, I know.
pretty
Yep.
I'm pretty critical. Like I don't blow smoke. Like anybody that I've given feedback to will tell you if something's bad, I will literally tell you it's bad. And if something's good, I think it's good. And I think my standards are pretty high. I'm not saying my stuff is the best in the world, but I see stuff out there and I kind of know what it's good like. I do want to give you a shout out. So Josh Galicki is in the chat group. I believe that Josh Galicki is the best bird photographer in the country. I have come to that conclusion over the last 2 years. When he is telling you how much he loves your work, and he's commented, I've been watching the chat a couple times. He's commented a couple times about how impressed he is of your images. That is the highest of praise. He's been on the show quite a few times, but just really, you should really feel good about that. Before I get to this last image, which is my favorite, I do want to ask. Somebody asked a question. What was your strategy for using a remote and manually focusing for a bird in flight? Now, did you remote trigger? I don't know if that was the cave swallow or the skimmers, but I don't imagine you would. I mean, you could pre-focus to a spot in space and hope it flies through there, but I would imagine you did use autofocus for that.
Actually, no.
Just enough depth of field that it didn't matter.
Yeah, and there have been other times where I even done more shallow depth of field, and I just think that I just do not trust the focusing because I can't see what I'm doing, and if that were to like, I'm sitting here sometimes for hours without actually checking my camera, and I do not want to risk it, focusing really far away and then just repeatedly focusing on the background over and over again, and then come back and realize, oh, actually, none of the images were in focus, even if the bird showed up. So at the moment, yeah, I've pretty much just used exclusively manual focus when working with a remote.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's somebody I made this video about remote focusing. So you can actually remote focus. It is possible, but the app for Nikon is called SnapBridge, and it's pretty crappy. By the time you focus on the bird and take a picture, it literally takes like a second, and you get one shot, and then you do it again. You repeat the process, and it's kind of crappy. I've played around with it a few times. Somebody told me there's a program out there where you can shoot at full frame rate, and I'll put it in the comments afterwards when I edit this video. But it was interesting. I went to go find the program, and I couldn't find it anymore. So I don't know what happened to this program. But yeah, somebody said there is a remote triggering program. It's a third-party program where you can actually look at your screen through live view. Now, you can't do this for hours because eventually your camera runs out of battery or something. But yeah, you can actually touch the screen, autofocus on that spot, and it would track. I can't imagine doing it with birds in flight. But if you were set up on like you're burrowing out earlier, or maybe a feeder, or you had a couple different perches set up in an area, and they were landing on different perches, and you didn't know which one you wanted to focus on. If the bird landed for a second, you could actually touch your screen and autofocus. And then, so if anybody knows of this program, or if anybody knows of a way to do that, just put it down in the comments. I think that'd be pretty interesting. All right, I'm ready to get to this image. I built it up a little bit because I'm not going to lie to you, and I told you I don't blow smoke. I like busting your chops a little bit because I think you're a good kid. Now, I think this is one of the best images of a bird photography I've ever seen. So, and I consume probably 1,000 or 10,000 bird images a day or a week. Like I just consume volumes of bird images for the last 7 years. So this is one of my, when I saw this, I thought this is absolutely just stunning. Like it is absolutely like, not only is it art, not only is this go on your wall, but there is compositionally, there is so much happening here that is perfect. And if I was a judge in a competition and I saw this, I don't know that I would even look at anything else. Like I literally think I would see this and say, it's done, it's over, we're good. Like everybody else could go home. So maybe it's just me, like maybe this just resonates with me for some reason. But when you look at the depth of this, so if you we always talk about like rule of thirds or rule of odds and things happening in threes, and you look at the depth of the image with one tree way out of focus, one tree kind of in focus, and then the perch with the bird. Not only that, the freaking thing makes a heart. So you've got a bird perched in some tree that magically makes a heart. This almost looks, and I know you don't composite your images, so I really want to talk about the technically, how you achieve this. But it almost looks like this was done, like this was created. I mean, that's how great this photo is. It almost looks like this was a manipulated, created image, not something that was taken in camera. So I blew you up pretty good here, brother.
Yeah.
So walk me through this one.
Yeah. So when I look at my images and I think of look at ones that I think, okay, this is something that's going to stay in my portfolio for a long time. This is very high up there. Probably one of my favorite images, if not my favorite. So yeah, so when we talk about taking this image, um, the morning of, I knew it was likely to be foggy, so my plan was to photograph to go to this particularly interesting little grove of trees because just to photograph landscapes, just because um, trees and fog, those things go together perfectly, and so when I first noticed that this little bird, he had, it was a eastern bluebird, when it landed in this heart, kind of the slow methodical thought process that I had been in of like, setting it all up on a tripod and getting things framed up just kind of went out the window, and it's like, okay, just get this shot. And so this was taken on, on a very foggy day. So you'll notice, the background is completely just fog. And so straight out of camera, this image, it kind of that main tree in the foreground, it was much more kind of washed out and low contrast. And so then to kind of get that dark shape to really show up, then it's kind of crush the black somewhat. And then and another thing is, originally there was some shadow detail in that main tree there, and so I found that to actually be somewhat distracting. So then I also kind of like by kind of crushing the blacks there, and then I kind of wanted to remove that somewhat distracting texture in there, and then I'm not sure if you can tell here, but then I've also messed with the exposure offset. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that in Photoshop, but what that kind of does is kind of gives it this kind of faded look that I think kind of captures the kind of the misty feel of it. But yeah, I mean, it just one other thing that I definitely want to note is it just as full disclosure, and the bottom left side of the image where you'll see that there is kind of that empty space there. Mm-hmm. There was some like just crap poking into frame that I have removed in Photoshop. So I just wanted to be just kind of have full disclosure there.
Oh yeah, we appreciate your and this is a really good one because it goes back to contest. If I saw this in a contest, I'd say you win. This is not eligible.
Yeah, it's
because
not.
Of that.
Yeah.
Would you enter it with the crap in it in the lower left corner, or you just think it ruins the image?
If I were to enter it, it would be cropped into a 16:9.
Okay, that's what I was going to say. Or would you crop it differently to get rid of it?
Yeah, I would crop it. I would crop it as just the top part.
Yeah.
That's what I did at first.
Yep.
But the fact that you said that you pick this if you were a judge at a contest, I was that's kind of what prompted me to.
You're
be
cringing.
Like, oh,
you're like, I can't do
it. Yeah, right. Sure.
It is really tough when you are editing images and you're like, God, this final. I did one. I have an image I really like. It's a loon and it's a really pretty scene. It's not contest eligible, and I think it would do okay in a contest. Like I think it's really pretty. The composition's right, but I couldn't get the full scene in. So like you had said earlier, sometimes you'll shoot and then you'll pan up. I mean, I probably stitched 3 or 4 frames together because I wanted to get these trees in there. And then, I kind of, adjusted it just a hair to get it all right and to make the composition even better. It really was done with the mindset of maybe this works as more of like an artistic piece than a contest entry. And again, I appreciate your disclosure because a lot of people don't disclose that stuff. And that's a whole other subject about, kind of fooling people with what happens. But I think everybody understands that not every picture is going to be out of camera. And sometimes there are edits that are done. I remove branches and sticks and things. Sometimes if I've got leaves that have little holes in them, I'll just fill in the hole because it's ugly, and this isn't a contest entry and it's not going into a documentation. So yeah, I take liberty to do that. I think the one thing that we have a similar mindset is we want the scene to feel like it felt. So is it the same scene? I'm not changing the background. I'm not adding another animal in. I'm not creating a scene that wasn't there. I'm just kind of manipulating everything that was there and cleaning up a little bit of the garbage that didn't make it work. So
yeah, and I think one way I like to think about that is that when you're looking at a scene, like this scene, for example, what you're focused, at least what most people would be focused on, is like, wow, look at this, that, that bird in that little circle there, and look at those really cool trees around it, and not really looking at the sticks and or junk or whatever. Now, as photographers, I think we're highly tuned to look immediately at that stuff.
Hmm.
But but when that's really not what you're focusing on, I mean, yes, you're changing the scene by removing it, but it's not like it to the viewer of the scene. It's kind of not an important detail as much as it
Right.
is in a photograph.
Yep. Yep. I agree. All right. Hey, listen. If you're tuned in here, we had a nice live audience today. Put some messages in here if you have anything for Tobias that you want to ask him before we wrap up. I'll give a couple seconds here. I got to tell you, man, I've wanted to have you on the show. I think I had this theme of having a young photographer or a younger photographer. By the way, what is your major in college?
Yeah, so my major is computer engineering.
Yeah.
So it's pretty far from wildlife photography, but it gives me kind of a really good outlet to get out in nature and kind of have a be creative and
Yeah. Your brain's pretty big. Does it ever push against the side of your skull and hurt?
haven't had that problem yet, so maybe not as
No.
big as you think.
Okay. All right. Yeah. One of the things I appreciate about, and I mentioned just like this desire to be different and to be creative and how it drives you. And you see it, you just see it in your work. Like it's obvious that you do not want to be looked at as another guy shooting birds on sticks. So I think that's incredible. And while there's nothing wrong with, I shoot birds on sticks all the time. There's nothing wrong with it. I do appreciate people that take that extra moment and creativity is one of the things that separates people, and not everybody have it, not everybody can see it, not everybody can visualize it. And I think a lot of times in your work I see that you are actually taking a minute to be thoughtful and to visualize and to even plan out, how are these scenes going to look when I'm done. It doesn't always work like that, but I think the more thoughtful you are about it and the better the approach you have about it, the more likely you are to get these really interesting and creative images. So I'm going to scroll down here through the chat. I think it looks like I don't see anything. Yeah,
Any
I don't see
questions?
any new questions coming in. Nice live audience tonight. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Tobias, you have anything going on coming up? I mean, you're any trip, like I always like to ask people, if you could go to any area of the country right now or any area of the world, where would you go? So while the questions are
Uh,
coming in, where would you
ooh,
go?
hmm. At the moment, oh man, I have to like think about the season and everything.
Yeah.
There's so
So
many.
spring. You can get one spring trip for free. Where do you go?
Well, okay. Uh,
You can come to
I'm not
Pennsylvania,
sure.
man. I got an
I'm
extra
not sure if
room
I
up
give you.
here. Yeah, come up to
Oh
Pennsylvania, man.
yeah.
Anytime. You got an open invite. We'll shoot
Hey,
warblers. We'll shoot warblers all
yeah.
week.
Man, warblers, that's a nemesis for me. I have such a hard time with them.
I'll get you more birds on a stick than you can ever imagine. All right, what
Yeah.
species? What do you have a nemesis species? So I have like three or four: Nashville warbler, nemesis, Cape May warbler, total nemesis. Do you have like a species you're just like, I got a snow bunting? I
Ooh,
photographed it
yeah.
this year. Actually, I photographed a snow bunting like 10 feet away. It wasn't a great image, but it was kind of cool
Mhm.
because I'd been chasing this species. So I didn't really. I kind of checked it off the list. I didn't really love it, but do you have a couple nemesis species that you like? You're a bit of a birder still.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Um, so there's also kind of nemesis species that might be really common, but I just have had a really hard time getting like a photo that I'm actually really proud of the species. And I think of like the scissor-tailed flycatcher as an example. I mean, that's a common bird in Texas. That's not rare at all.
Hmm.
But I just have not been able to like I've really been keeping my eye out, and I just have not been able to find any like really good situations. And I feel like, considering it's one of the, I think one of the coolest birds that I have locally, uh, it's annoying to me that I haven't been able to like capture it in a way that I would like.
Yeah.
Um,
Have you ever seen a zone-tailed hawk?
oh yeah, yeah, I see them sometimes. Yeah, that's impossible to photograph. I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Like, you see them fly overs almost exclusively.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not
I,
common where I
I,
am,
I
but I see them.
Yeah, I asked you that because I was hoping you were going to tell me no. I made one trip to Texas, one, and I saw a zone-tailed hawk on the ground.
Where?
I going from Corpus Christi to Galveston. I couldn't tell you the
Huh.
name of the road,
Yeah,
but
that's not a
yeah,
good quest.
pretty amazing. I thought it was pretty rare for that area, and
Yeah, for sure.
I thought it was on prey, and it was like all like mantled up and covering the prey, and it had a snake, and I was backing up. I
Oh, wow.
passed it, and I thought it was a black vulture at first. I'm like, that's a weird looking
Mhm.
bird. So I'm backing up, and I'm looking in the rear view mirror, and I don't even have my camera in my hand, and I turn out the window, and I look around, and he lifts up, and I see the tail, and there's only two species that look like that, and one I
Yep.
think is a black
Common Black Hawk, yeah.
common black hawk. Yep, you got it. Common black hawk or zone-tailed hawk. And after I kind of visually put everything back together and asked a few people, they said it had to be a zone-tailed hawk. It couldn't have been a common black hawk. So anyway, that's my
That's crazy.
zone-tailed hawk story. I wrote it down. I counted it. I don't always count on my birder list. I'm still a little bit of a birder. I did add it to my life list. So yeah, it was a pretty exciting moment. Texas is really an interesting place because you do get some different species down there, some endemics, some things that are not normal for the rest of the country. So yeah, if you ever want to come up northeast, let me know.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. All right. I didn't see any questions come in, so let me just
Okay.
I'm gonna sign hang on to Skype. Don't talk anymore. Just hang on to Skype. I'll catch up with you at the end of the show, okay? All right, man. Have a good night.
All right. Yeah, you too.
All right. Well, hey, thanks for tuning into another episode of Wildlife Inspired. I am, what a great episode. And you can see this kid is talented. So we had this quick discussion about, him, possibly getting into wildlife photography and what a challenging career move that is at his age. And, I just think the world of this kid. He is so, so good. So anyway, hope you enjoyed the episode. I will tell you, just watching it and just talking to him and seeing the images, I feel really good about it. I hope it gets a lot of views out on YouTube. If you're not subscribed to the channel, do me a favor, make sure you are subscribed. And if you're one of those loyal followers, and I saw your names in the list, I want you right now, go down and hit the thumbs up button, put a comment down in the comment section, and just let everyone know how much you enjoyed the video. For whatever reason, the algorithms love that stuff. As you know, I'm trying to grow the channel. I'm going to show you real quickly kind of what I have coming up. So Tobias, you're still on. Don't pick your nose. So right here, you're going to see next week, I've got a show scheduled for, oh my gosh, it's a mirrorless versus DSLR for wildlife photography. That's going to be next Sunday. And then the week after that, I'm doing one of those, it's kind of a new concept where I take two photographers and they go head to head. And the live audience votes on that. After that, we're doing another show with wildlife as art. I think that is going to be phenomenal. It's a little bit different than what I've done in the past, but I've got a guest that's going to talk about wildlife photography as it pertains to what works in the home. And then the month of April, I announced this on Instagram. The whole month of April, I'm doing birds and native plants. So we're going to have Instagram challenges and YouTube videos and live shows the entire month. I'm super excited. If you guys know me, you know I'm super excited about that kind of stuff. So I love my native plants. I love my birds. Can't wait for the snow to melt and see some of these early spring plants come to fruition on my property. So anyway, that's what's coming up on the show. Appreciate you guys tuning in tonight, and thank you. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you soon. Hey everyone, and thanks for tuning into another live episode of Wildlife Inspired. If you're not a subscriber, make sure you hit the subscribe button, and I would really appreciate it if you just hit the like button. Now, if you enjoy the content here, remember, you can check out my subscription site over on patreon.com, and there I take you behind the scenes and in the field for exclusive footage, and I also show you editing techniques in both Lightroom and Photoshop. There's also archived episodes that are only available on Patreon. Now, you can also find me across the board on social media at SKeysImages. I really do appreciate your ongoing support, and I hope that we can continue to find inspiration in wildlife together.